I still remember the way my mother smiled when she introduced me to one of Hollywood's top directors, my father's close friend. "This is Claire, our helpful in the kitchen girl." Her voice was sweet as honey, but I felt the knife hidden behind every word. And then Marcus Sullivan, the 3-time Oscar-winning director, shook my hand, looked straight into my eyes and said, "We're honored to work with you, Miss Hartley." In that moment, my mother's smile froze. My father looked away. And me? I'd spent my entire life becoming invisible in this house. But they didn't know that every time they pushed me into the kitchen, they were creating the very monster who would overturn everything they believed in. I sat in my car outside my parents' house, hands trembling on the steering wheel, preparing to attend the dinner party celebrating my sister Sophia's promotion. From the back seat, my 3-year-old son Max asked, "Mommy, why are you crying?" I touched my cheek and realized tears were streaming down my face. I wondered if this time would be different, or if Mom would introduce me as the unpaid help, like always. 28 years old, a working actress, a single mother, and still I felt like that little girl who never quite measured up. Not like Sophia, the brilliant attorney, not like Dylan, the business school golden boy, just Claire, the firstborn disappointment. I reached into the trunk for Sophia's gift and saw the old box of VHS tapes I'd found in my parents' attic last time, recordings of Mom when she was still a stunt double. I'd planned to bring them in and ask her about them, but decided to hide them again. "Not yet," I whispered to myself. Those tapes showed a version of my mother I'd never known, a woman who flew through the air fearlessly, who risked her body for art, who had dreams bigger than this suffocating suburban house. That woman had disappeared long before I was born, and I needed to understand why. Walking into the house, I watched Max run toward his grandmother, Patricia, but she only patted his head absently before turning to embrace Sophia tightly. "Sweetheart, I'm so proud of you," she gushed. I stood in the doorway, that familiar feeling washing over me again, the sensation of being a ghost in the very house where I grew up. Then the doorbell rang. Dad opened it, his voice cheerful in a way it never was with me. "Marcus, you made it." A silver-haired man in his early 60s stepped inside. His eyes swept across the living room and stopped on me. For a second, I saw something flash across his face. Recognition? Surprise? Or guilt? Dinner unfolded in the large dining room. I sat at the far end of the table, next to Max. Marcus Sullivan sat to my father Richard's right, the position of honor. The conversation revolved around Sophia's achievements, her recent victory in a major tech company lawsuit. Patricia recounted every detail like she was telling a fairy tale. Dylan shared about his nearly completed thesis. No one asked me about my work. I was used to it by now, the way conversations flowed around me like I was a piece of furniture. I cut Max's chicken into small pieces and tried to ignore the familiar ache in my chest. Midway through the meal, Marcus asked my father, "So, Richard, you have 3 wonderful children. What do they all do?" This was the moment I'd been waiting for, the chance for Dad to introduce me, to acknowledge I was part of this family too. But Patricia cut in quickly, her voice bright and dismissive. "Well, Sophia here is a brilliant attorney at Morrison & Welch, and Dylan is finishing his MBA at USC, already has 3 job offers lined up." She paused, then turned to me with that sweet smile and cold eyes. "And Claire is helpful in the kitchen, aren't you, sweetheart? She made the appetizers tonight." Time stopped. Blood rushed to my face, not because I was ashamed of being an actress, but because of how effortlessly Mom erased my entire existence with one sentence. I looked at Dad, hoping he'd correct her, but Richard just took a sip of wine and avoided my eyes. Sophia laughed softly, that pitying little chuckle I'd heard my whole life. Dylan stared at his plate. Max tugged on my sleeve. "Mommy, you're an actress, right?" His innocent voice cut through me like a blade. Before I could respond, Marcus Sullivan set down his silverware, his expression serious. "Actually, I believe I've seen Claire's work." The entire table went silent. "You were in that indie film last year, The Silent Hour, weren't you? The supporting role, the daughter who discovers her mother's past?" I nodded, my heart pounding. "Yes, that was me." Marcus smiled gently. "Your performance was remarkable, very subtle, very real. I told my casting director about you." He turned to Richard. "You didn't mention your daughter was such a talented actress." Patricia's smile froze, exactly like the moment I'd remember forever, not from pleasant surprise, but from something else entirely. Fear? Anger? Or old pain being ripped open again? Richard looked away, avoiding both me and Marcus, as if witnessing an accident about to happen. Sophia set down her wineglass, her voice sweet but barbed. "Oh, that little film? I thought it went straight to streaming." Dylan chimed in. "Claire's been doing this for years, but acting is such an unstable career." Marcus ignored them, continuing to look at me with an intensity that made me nervous. "Miss Hartley, I'm currently in pre-production for my new project. It's a period drama about unsung heroes in the film industry, the stunt performers, the extras, the people who built Hollywood from the shadows." He paused, his eyes becoming distant. "People like your mother used to be." Patricia stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "I think we should clear the table," she announced, but her voice shook. Marcus continued, gentle but firm. "I'd like you to audition for the lead role. We start shooting in 3 months. This could be your breakthrough, Claire. Lead role. Breakthrough." Those words echoed in my head like church bells. This was what I'd dreamed of for 10 years of struggling, of taking bit parts and commercial work, of being told I wasn't quite right for every major role I auditioned for. But looking at Mom's face right now, I understood something. She was scared. Not scared I would fail. She was scared I would succeed, and suddenly, I wanted to know why. When Marcus shook my hand goodbye, he slipped me a business card and whispered, "Your mother was the best stunt double I ever worked with. What happened to her on set that day, it was my fault. I owe her this chance through you." Then he left, leaving me standing frozen with a burning business card in my hand. Patricia watched me from the top of the stairs, her eyes filled with naked hatred I'd never seen before. For the first time in my life, I didn't see indifference. She was terrified, and I needed to know what she was afraid of. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in my small apartment, Max sleeping soundly in the next room, but my mind wouldn't stop spinning. Marcus's words kept echoing. What happened to her on set that day? It was my fault. The next morning, I called Diane, my best friend who worked as a researcher at USC's film archive. "I need to find everything about a film production in the mid-90s. My mom was the stunt double. There was an accident." Diane hesitated. "Claire, are you sure you want to dig this up?" Her concern was genuine, but I'd made up my mind. "I've spent my whole life being invisible, Diane. I need to know why. I didn't just want to know what happened to Mom. I wanted to know why she hated me so much, why every time she looked at me, she turned away like she was seeing a ghost. Was it because I was the firstborn daughter? Or was there something deeper, something that had been buried for almost 30 years? 3 days later, I found myself back at my parents' house on a weekday afternoon when I knew they'd both be at work. I told Sophia I'd forgotten Max's toy there, a convenient lie. In the attic, surrounded by boxes of old belongings, I searched with purpose this time. The dust made me sneeze, but I kept digging through decades of forgotten memories. I found the box of VHS tapes again, labeled in handwriting I barely recognized as Mom's. Patricia Morrison, Showreel, 1994 to 1996. Morrison was her maiden name. I took them home and spent that evening watching, frame by frame. Mom jumped from buildings, drove cars in high-speed chases, fought in brutal hand-to-hand combat scenes. In every shot, she wore costumes identical to the lead actress, but her face was always turned away or hidden. No name in the credits, like ghosts without identity. Watching her move with such confidence, such fearlessness, I felt like I was meeting a stranger who happened to share my mother's body. But the real discovery came when I found her old diary, buried beneath costume pieces and forgotten photographs. The first page read, "My stunt diary, Patricia Morrison." My hands trembled as I turned each page, reading her dreams, her passion, her love for the feeling of flying through the air when she performed dangerous stunts. But as the entries progressed, the tone darkened. August 15th, 1996. Marcus asked me to do the rooftop jump for the final scene. It's 40 feet. No other double wants to do it. He said I'm the only one brave enough. He said, "This will be my legacy." 3 days later, she wrote, August 18th, 1996. I'm scared, but I can't say no. This is the biggest production I've ever worked on. If I back out, I'll never work again. The entry ended there. The next pages had been torn out. I sat on my apartment floor, the diary in my lap, feeling like I'd opened a door I could never close. Then I found the old Variety article from 1996. Stunt double severely injured in on-set accident. Director Marcus Sullivan's production faces scrutiny. The article described Patricia Morrison falling from 40 feet when her safety harness failed. She broke her spine, lost the ability to walk for 6 months. Her career ended. The production paid a quiet settlement. No criminal investigation. Marcus Sullivan continued his career. The film won multiple awards. I clutched the article, tears streaming down my face. For the first time, I understood. Mom didn't hate me. She hated herself. Every time she looked at me pursuing acting, she saw a younger version of herself, someone brave enough to sacrifice her body for art, but not brave enough to say no when they put her life in danger. I was born in 1997, 1 year after the accident. Mom got pregnant with me during her recovery, while she lay bedridden, while her career was shattered, while Dad, Richard, the ambitious assistant producer, had to abandon his Hollywood dreams to care for her. I was the living reminder of everything Mom had lost. Not because I was a daughter, but because I was living proof of her failure. But something still didn't add up. There was a piece missing from this puzzle. I could go home right now and confront Mom with everything I'd found. But some instinct stopped me. I remembered the fear in Patricia's eyes when Marcus offered me the role. There was something deeper, something even these newspapers and diaries didn't reveal. I needed to hear it from the source. The next day, I called Marcus Sullivan and asked to meet at his studio. In his private office, surrounded by 3 Oscar statues gleaming on shelves, Marcus sat across from me, his eyes filled with guilt that looked like it had been festering for decades. "I knew you'd come," he said quietly, his voice heavy with regret. "I didn't waste time. Tell me what really happened that day." Marcus stood up, walked to the window overlooking the studio lot below. "The safety harness didn't just break, Claire. It was never properly inspected. I pushed the schedule too hard. We were over budget, behind timeline. When Patricia raised concerns about the equipment, I dismissed her, told her she was being paranoid, that she needed to trust the professionals." He turned back to face me, and I saw shame etched in every line of his face. When she fell, I watched her body hit the ground. I heard her scream, and I knew it was my fault. "Why didn't you do anything?" I demanded, anger rising in my throat. "Why did you just keep working, keep winning awards, keep pretending it never happened?" Marcus's voice cracked. "Cowardice. The studio paid her off to avoid a lawsuit, made me sign an NDA, and we all moved on. Except your mother. She never moved on. Every Oscar I won after that, I thought of her lying in that hospital bed. Every success felt hollow, built on her broken spine." He sat back down, suddenly looking much older than 60. "The film I'm making now, it's not just about stunt performers. It's my confession. My attempt to tell the world about people like your mother who gave everything and got nothing in return." Then came the twist that changed everything. "I want you to be the face of that story because you're her daughter. Because maybe, if I can make you a star, I can repay a fraction of what I took from her. I know it doesn't fix anything. I know it's selfish, trying to ease my own guilt. But I've watched your work, Claire. You're talented enough to carry this film, and you deserve the chance your mother never got." He handed me the script, a heavy document that felt like it weighed more than just paper. I flipped to the final page and read the last line of dialogue. "I don't need them to remember my mother. I'll become the legacy they tried to erase." I closed my eyes, an idea forming in my mind like a storm gathering strength. I wouldn't just play this role. I would live it. And Mom would have to watch. I decided to go back to my parents' house that Friday evening, carrying both the script and Mom's old diary. The family was having dinner, just the 5 of us this time. No guests, no performances, just Dad, Mom, Sophia, Dylan, and me. I set the diary down on the table in the middle of the dinner plates, between the roasted chicken and the mashed potatoes. Patricia looked down at it, and her face went pale as death. "Where did you get that?" Her voice came out as a whisper, barely audible over the clink of silverware that suddenly stopped. "Your attic, the place where you buried your past." I opened to the page where she'd written about the accident. August 18th, 1996. I'm scared, but I can't say no. The silence in that dining room was suffocating. No one spoke. Sophia glanced at Dylan. Dylan looked at Dad. Richard set down his knife and fork, his voice hoarse. "Claire, this is not the time." But I was done being quiet. Done being invisible, done pretending everything was fine when it never had been. "When is the time, Dad? When is the right time to talk about why Mom treats me like a ghost? Why you can't even look at me when I talk about acting?" Patricia stood up so fast her chair nearly toppled backward. "You have no idea what you're talking about." Her hands were shaking, and I could see she was barely holding herself together. "Then tell me," I shouted, and it felt like something breaking open inside my chest. For the first time in my life, I raised my voice at my mother, "Tell me why you hate me." Is it because I remind you of what you lost? Because I'm brave enough to chase what you gave up? The words came out harsh and cutting, and I saw Mom flinch like I'd physically struck her. Brave? Patricia laughed, but it was a bitter, broken sound that had no joy in it. Her eyes were red, filling with tears. You think you're brave? You have no idea what bravery is. I gave my body, my future, my entire life for that industry. And what did I get? A broken spine and a settlement check with an NDA attached. They erased me like I never existed. She pointed at me with a shaking finger. And now you want to walk the same path? You want to let them chew you up and spit you out just like they did to me? Over my dead body. Her voice broke on those last words, and I realized this wasn't hate. This was terror. There it was. Not hatred. Fear. Mom didn't hate me. She was terrified I would suffer the same fate she did. But what she didn't understand was that I wasn't her, and the world had changed. Before I could respond, Richard finally spoke up, his voice tired and defeated. Patricia, maybe it's time to tell her everything. I turned to face my father. Tell me what? Richard sighed deeply, like a man who'd been carrying a weight for too long and was finally ready to set it down. When your mother had the accident, she was 3 months pregnant. With you. Time stopped. The room spun. I gripped the edge of the table to steady myself. The doctors said the fall could have caused a miscarriage. Richard continued, his voice barely above a whisper. For weeks, we didn't know if you'd survive. Your mother blamed herself. She thought if she lost you, it would be punishment for her ambition. I looked at Patricia, and for the first time, I saw past the cold exterior to the terrified woman underneath. She was crying openly now, not bothering to wipe the tears away. I prayed every night that you'd live, Mom said through her sobs. And when you were born healthy, perfect, I thought it was a miracle. But every time I looked at you, I remembered that rooftop. I remembered that I almost killed you before you even had a chance to live. The truth hit me like a physical blow. I pushed you away because I was terrified that if you became an actress, if you followed my footsteps, something would happen to you. I couldn't bear to lose you twice, once before you were born, and once to the same industry that destroyed me. Patricia sank back into her chair, her whole body shaking. Part of me wanted to go to her, wanted to hold her and say I understood now. But the other part, the part that had endured 28 years of being treated like I didn't matter, was still too hurt. You almost lost me before I was born, I said, my voice trembling with emotion I could barely contain. But you did lose me every day after that. You lost me when you refused to hug me after my first school play. You lost me when you didn't come to my college graduation. You lost me every single time you introduced me as helpful in the kitchen instead of your daughter. I picked up the script Marcus had given me, held it up for everyone to see. Marcus Sullivan offered me the lead role in his new film. It's about women like you, Mom. Women who were erased. Women who gave everything and got nothing. And I'm going to take it. Patricia shook her head frantically, her voice desperate. No. No, you can't. I forbid it. But I was done asking for permission, done waiting for approval that would never come. You can't forbid me anything. I'm 28 years old. I have a son who needs to see his mother chase her dreams. And I have almost 3 decades of being invisible to make up for. Sophia tried to intervene, her lawyer voice coming out smooth and condescending. Claire, don't be so dramatic. Mom's just trying to protect you. I whirled on my sister. Protect me? Or protect herself? Did she protect me when she let everyone believe I was just the family's unpaid help? Did she protect me when she chose Dylan's soccer games over my opening nights? When she forgot my birthday 3 years in a row because she was too busy planning Sophia's engagement party? The words tumbled out, years of resentment I'd kept buried. I'm taking this role. I'm going to be everything you were too afraid to be, and you're going to watch. I turned and walked toward the door, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst through my chest. Behind me, Patricia called out, her voice breaking. If you do this, if you walk out that door, don't come back. She thought I would stop, thought I would turn around like I always had before, desperate for her approval. But I didn't. I kept walking, opened the door, and stepped into the night air. The door closed behind me with a final, definitive thump. Inside, Patricia collapsed into her chair, her entire body shaking. Richard put a hand on her shoulder, but said nothing. Sophia and Dylan sat in silence, realizing for the first time that their sister, the one they'd always overlooked, was stronger than any of them had ever imagined. The next 3 months were the hardest of my life, but also the most transformative. I prepared for the audition like I'd never prepared for anything before. I watched all of Mom's old stunt reels over and over, studying the way she moved, the way she fell, the way she gave her body to the camera without hesitation. I hired a stunt coordinator to train me, spending hours every day learning how to take falls, how to roll, how to make danger look effortless. My body ached constantly, covered in bruises I hid under long sleeves. But every pain was a reminder. Mom did this for years. I only needed to do it for 3 months. Audition day arrived. In the casting room, facing Marcus and his entire production team, I didn't just read lines. I performed a stunt, jumping from a raised platform, rolling across the floor, coming up with the same fierce determination I'd seen in Mom's eyes in those old videos. When I finished, standing in the middle of the room breathing hard, Marcus had tears in his eyes. He didn't say anything for a long moment. Then quietly, "You got the part." I wanted to cry, to scream, to celebrate, but all I felt was a strange calm. This was just the beginning. Training for the role was brutal. I had to learn to be a real stunt double, had to experience the falls, the bruises, the constant physical punishment. But every injury was a lesson, every scar a badge. Mom did this for years, I reminded myself during the worst moments. I only need to do it for 3 months. Diane became my support system, taking care of Max when I trained late into the night, holding me when I cried from exhaustion and pain. "Are you sure this is worth it?" she asked one evening, watching me ice my swollen knee. "I have to do this," I told her. Not for revenge, but to show her that you can survive this industry, that you can take the pain and turn it into art. During this time, I received only one message from my family. Dylan texted, "Mom's not doing well. She barely eats. Dad's worried. Maybe you should call?" I stared at the message, guilt gnawing at my insides, but I didn't respond. Not yet. The most important scene in the film was the one that recreated the accident that had ended Mom's career. Marcus designed it to be identical to the original, the same 40-foot height, the same angle, the same layout. But this time, every safety measure was checked 3 times. Before we filmed, Marcus pulled me aside. "You don't have to do this yourself, Claire. We have professional stunt doubles. This is too dangerous." I shook my head firmly. My mother did this without proper safety measures. I'm doing it with every protection possible. I need to do this. For her, to show that it should have been safe, that she deserved to be safe. When the cameras started rolling, I stood on top of the building set, looking down 40 feet to the pads below. The safety harness was secure, checked and rechecked. The safety team was ready. But for one moment, I imagined Mom standing here 30 years ago, looking down just like this, just as scared, but with no one protecting her. Tears rolled down my face. It wasn't in the script, but Marcus didn't call cut. He let the cameras keep rolling. I jumped. In the 3 seconds of falling, I understood Mom. I understood the feeling of trusting your life to cables and other people's competence. I understood the fear, but I also understood the freedom, the sensation of flying, of being truly alive. This was why Mom loved it, and this was why she could never forgive herself for losing it. I landed safely. The crew applauded. Marcus hugged me tightly. That was perfect. Your mother would be proud. But what no one knew was that in the crowd of observers invited to watch the filming, there was a woman in the back row wearing a scarf and sunglasses, standing where she thought no one would notice her. When I jumped, when I fell, when I landed safely, that woman pressed her hand to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Then she turned and disappeared before anyone could recognize her. Only Marcus saw her. He knew who she was. But he said nothing. 2 months later, the trailer for In Her Shadow was released. It opened with me as Jenny, standing in front of a mirror, putting on makeup to become a copy of a famous actress. The voiceover said, "They wanted my face, my body, my courage, but they never wanted my name." The trailer cut between my jump from the building and flashbacks of Jenny's mother doing the same stunt. Then the accident. The screen went black. A scream echoed. The final shot showed Jenny standing at an awards podium saying, "This award isn't for me. It's for every stunt performer whose name you never knew, whose face you never saw, whose sacrifice you never acknowledged." The trailer went viral within 24 hours. The press called it Oscar bait, but in the best way. People started researching the history of stunt performers in Hollywood, discovering stories like Patricia's. My social media following exploded from 5,000 to over 200,000 in 1 week. People tagged me in posts about justice in the film industry, about invisible workers, about the women who built Hollywood from the shadows. Then I received a comment from an anonymous account created that same day. 0 followers, 0 posts, just one comment. "Your mother is watching, and she's terrified you'll become like her, forgotten and broken. But maybe she's also seeing that you're stronger than she ever was." I stared at that comment, my heart racing. Who wrote this? Was it Mom? Someone else in the family? I'd never know. But it didn't matter. What mattered was that somewhere, Patricia was watching. And for the first time in 30 years, she was seeing me. 1 month before the film wrapped, in the middle of shooting an emotional scene, the assistant director approached me during a break. "There's someone here to see you." "She says she's your mother." My heart stopped. I hadn't seen Mom in 4 months. No phone calls, no texts, nothing but that anonymous comment I could never prove came from her. Patricia stood outside the soundstage, looking older than I remembered. Her hair had more gray, she'd lost weight, but her eyes were different. Not cold anymore. Terrified, vulnerable, and something I'd never seen before. Open. "Mom," I said, my voice barely working. She looked at me, really looked at me, for what felt like the first time in my life. "I saw the trailer," Patricia said, her voice rough like she'd been crying for days. "I saw you jump." Silence stretched between us, filled with 30 years of pain and misunderstanding. "I was there," she continued, the words coming out in a rush. "That day on set. I snuck in. I watched you do the stunt that destroyed my life, and I watched you land safely." Her voice cracked on those last words. "For 30 years, I blamed that rooftop. I blamed Marcus. I blamed the industry. But standing there watching you, I realized I've been blaming the wrong thing." Tears streamed down her face, and she made no attempt to wipe them away. "I blamed my ambition. I blamed my courage. And I punished you for having the same fire I once had. I was so scared that if I encouraged you, you'd end up like me, broken and forgotten. So I tried to break you first, thinking it would keep you safe. But all I did was make you feel invisible. And I'm so sorry." Part of me wanted to run to her, to hold her and say everything was forgiven. But 28 years of pain didn't disappear with one apology. "I needed to hear this when I was 8, and you didn't come to my school play," I said, my voice shaking. "I needed to hear this when I was 18, and you told me acting was a waste of time. I needed to hear this 4 months ago when you called me helpful in the kitchen in front of your friends." Patricia nodded, tears continuing to fall. I know I'm too late." She looked broken, defeated, and for the first time I saw her not as my distant mother, but as a woman who'd been carrying unbearable pain for decades. "You are too late," I confirmed, the words hard but necessary. "But I need you to know something. I didn't do this to hurt you. I did this to free both of us. You spent 30 years living in the shadow of what happened. I won't. I refuse to let your trauma become my prison." Patricia looked around the soundstage, at the modern equipment, the strict safety protocols, the professional crew, everything she hadn't had 30 years ago. "It's different now, isn't it?" she whispered. "Safer, more protection, more respect." I nodded. "It is. Because people like you suffered, because your story, and thousands of stories like yours, forced them to change. You weren't forgotten, Mom. You were the foundation that made all of this possible." Patricia reached into her purse with trembling hands and pulled out an old, yellowed piece of paper. "I want you to have this. For the film, show people what it was like." I took it carefully. It was a photocopy of her stunt double contract from 1996. Reading through it, I felt sick. There was a clause where she waived all rights to sue, accepted all risks, essentially signed away her right to safety and justice. Her life had been worth less than their production schedule. "Why are you giving me this?" I asked, my throat tight. Mom met my eyes, and in them I saw something new. Not fear anymore, but a fragile kind of hope. "Because you're telling my story better than I ever could. And maybe if people see this, some other young woman won't have to choose between her dream and her safety. Maybe the next Patricia Morrison will have the protection she deserves." We stood there in the middle of the soundstage, 2 women separated by pain but connected by blood and understanding. "I have something else to confess," Patricia said quietly, sitting down on an equipment crate. "The reason I pushed you into the kitchen, the reason I wanted you to be helpful instead of ambitious, it wasn't just fear." "What was it?" I asked, though part of me already knew. "Jealousy," Mom admitted, and the words seemed to cost her everything. "You had things I never did. A son who adores you. Natural talent I had to learn through years of pain. And you were brave enough to pursue your dream despite me. I was jealous that you were stronger than I ever was. When Sophia became a lawyer, when Dylan went to business school, I was relieved. They chose safe paths I could understand. But you kept chasing the thing that broke me. Every time you got closer to success, I felt like I was watching myself drive toward a cliff instead of away from it. I wanted to stay angry, wanted to hold on to the hurt, but looking at her broken expression, I felt something shift inside me. I love you, Mom, but I can't fix your trauma. I can't make up for what the industry did to you. All I can do is live my life fully and hope that one day you'll see that my success doesn't erase your pain. It honors your sacrifice. Patricia and I didn't hug. There was no swelling music, no perfect movie moment. Just two women sitting 5 feet apart, both crying, both trying to find their way to each other across decades of hurt. "Can I watch you film?" Mom asked tentatively, like she was afraid I'd say no. I hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Okay, but you have to promise me something." She looked at me, waiting. "When the film premieres, you'll walk the red carpet with me." Not as Claire's mother, but as Patricia Morrison, stunt legend, the woman this film is really about. Her eyes widened in shock. "Claire, I don't know if I can do that." But I held firm. "You deserve to be seen, Mom. For 30 years, you've been invisible, just like you made me feel. No more hiding, no more shadows." Patricia thought about it for a long moment, and I could see the war happening behind her eyes, fear fighting with hope. Finally, she nodded slowly. "Okay, I'll try." "That's all I'm asking," I said, and for the first time in my life, I saw my mother smile at me with something that looked like pride. As she stood to leave, Patricia turned back one more time. "Claire, there's one more thing you should know. Marcus Sullivan called me last week. He wants to create a foundation for retired stunt performers, those who were injured and received nothing. He asked if I'd be on the board." She paused, her voice stronger now. "I said I'd think about it. But maybe it's time to turn the pain into something useful. Maybe it's time to stop hiding." I smiled, truly smiled. "I think that's a great idea, Mom." For the first time in 30 years, I saw hope in her eyes. Not hope for the past to change, but hope for a different future. 6 months later, In Her Shadow premiered at a major theater in Los Angeles. The red carpet stretched out like a river of lights, cameras flashing constantly. I stepped out of the car wearing an elegant black dress, looking more confident than I'd ever felt. The press shouted my name, but I didn't walk forward immediately. I waited. The second car arrived. Patricia stepped out wearing a silver suit, her gray hair professionally styled. She wasn't the thin, defeated woman from 4 months ago. This was Patricia Morrison, stunt legend, stepping back into the light after 3 decades in darkness. Patricia Morrison. "Patricia, look here." Reporters who'd done their research recognized her. I extended my hand. Mom took it. Together, we walked the red carpet. A reporter stopped us. "Claire, this film is very personal." "What does it mean to you?" I answered carefully. "This film is a love letter to every woman who gave everything to her craft and got nothing in return. But it's also a promise that we won't let their stories disappear anymore." The reporter turned to Patricia. "Mrs. Hartley, how does it feel to see your daughter bring your story to life?" Mom looked at me, tears forming but smiling. Terrifying, healing, and long overdue. For 30 years, I thought my accident was my ending. But watching Claire, I realized it was just the beginning of a different story, one that she's finishing for me. Inside the dark theater, I sat between Patricia and Marcus. Max sat on my other side, holding my hand tightly. When the accident scene played, when the hospital scene showed the aftermath, Patricia gripped the armrest so hard her knuckles turned white. I placed my hand over hers. This time, she didn't pull away. The film's final scene showed the main character at an awards podium. This isn't my award. This belongs to Patricia Morrison, to every unnamed face who jumped, fell, bled, and was forgotten. We see you now. We remember you now. The theater went completely silent as the credits rolled. Then one person started clapping. Then two. Then the entire audience rose to their feet. People turned to look at Patricia, recognizing her from the red carpet. Cameras flashed as she stood, tears streaming down her face, waving at the crowd with disbelief and joy. This was the moment she'd been denied 30 years ago. The recognition, the acknowledgement, the simple act of being seen. I watched my mother take in the applause, and I knew this was what healing looked like. The next week, I sat in Marcus Sullivan's office with Patricia beside me, signing papers to establish the Morrison Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to supporting injured stunt performers. Marcus had donated the initial funding, but Mom would be on the board. People ask me if making this film healed my relationship with my mother, I said to reporters covering the foundation's launch. The truth is, healing isn't an ending. It's a beginning. We're not fixed, but we're trying. And for the first time in 30 years, we're both visible to each other. We both matter. And that's where real change starts. That night, I went home to my apartment and tucked Max into bed. He looked up at me with those big, trusting eyes. "Mommy, was Grandma happy tonight?" He'd watched his grandmother speak publicly about her accident for the first time. "I think so, baby. I think she's starting to find her way back to happy." Max smiled sleepily. "Are you happy, Mommy?" I thought about his question. Really thought about it. "Yes, sweetheart. I'm happy. Because I'm not trying to be her, or fix her, or make her proud anymore. I'm just being me, and that's enough." I kissed his forehead, turned off his light, and walked to my own room. For the first time in as long as I could remember, I didn't carry that familiar weight of not being good enough, not being seen, not mattering. I'd stepped out of the shadow, both my mother's and my own. Tomorrow, I'd wake up and keep building the life I wanted, not the life everyone else thought I should have. That night, I slept deeply and dreamlessly, finally at peace with being exactly who I was. The invisible daughter had become visible, not by fighting for their approval, but by refusing to disappear.